if you go out and Google homeless, you'll see 1,000 photographers taking pictures of homeless people just out on the streets. I was taking portraits and they just look like ordinary people in the pictures. You would never know anything special about them, and there's sort of an eye-opening experience for people when they look at that picture and it's just an ordinary person sitting there, sometimes in their living room, sometimes at work, sometimes just sitting at the dining room table or laying on the couch or something. An ordinary circumstance with an ordinary person, but an extraordinary story that's paired with it. And I've had people cry and hug me and say, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I've seen people just stand there and read those stories and look at those pictures over and over and over. And it's really a rewarding experience to see voices that are not heard being heard.
Welcome to another edition of Chasing the Timeless. Today I have an artist, Martin Keey, who I met at a gallery here in Whitewater that had his art, which portrayed people that have gone through homeless situations. And what was fascinating about it is that part of the art is you also included their story that they were willing to share with you.
Right.
So how did you get involved with this? I know that you spent some time homeless, and just kind of tell me about a little
bit of background.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Context, as it were. Back in maybe the 1982, 83 era, I was going to college and I thought I knew everything, and my parents were stupid. And I guess I had a fight one day with my mom, and I ended up moving out in a huff. So I went over to a friend's house and they let me stay in their basement. And that lasted about 3 months, and their mom said, okay, he's got to go. That's enough. Guy can't live in our basement forever. So I ended up putting everything in my car, and I was working at a truck stop at the time. And I was in the kitchen. I was a baker. I was a cook. I was a dishwasher. I did all sorts of different jobs. It wasn't just me, but those were the jobs that I did. So I had access to food, and then the truck stop also had showers for the truckers. So I had access to where I could bathe and all that kind of stuff. So I've put everything in my car, and it ended up sleeping in my car underneath a parking lot light. And it was kind of safe because there were truckers who would do the exact same thing, and there were travelers who would be in their campers and things like that. So it was a fairly safe environment, but it was not a sustainable environment. I quickly found out because it got a little cold towards the end of October, and I know Wisconsin winters very well, and I'm like, I just can't keep doing this. So I went back home and I apologized to my parents, and fortunately they allowed me to move back in. Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done at the time. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of my introduction to being homeless. Okay. But then fast forward a few years, a friend of mine had an idea through her church to start this nonprofit called Morning Glory Ministries. And she asked if I would run the kitchen for this. And churches got involved, and buses were driving around the south side of Milwaukee, picking up homeless people and bringing them to the church, where I got to feed them. And we gave them lunch and a light supper. And then I think we did some to-go bags for sandwiches, if I remember correctly. And we were handing out toiletries and clothes, and there were showers at the church so that they could take a bath and get clean. And it was just really a fun event. And it was just a lot of activity. There was about 200 people that actually ended up showing up for that. And that gave me introduction to some people who were actually on the streets for a living. Well, not for a living, but to live. And after that, every Saturday morning, we would do a made-to-order breakfast for some of the homeless people. So every week, we'd get maybe 2 or 3, and then it was 5 and 6. And I got to know some of the people by name. And I remember one guy, his name was John, tall guy. He was about 6'5", super nice. The first time he showed up, he said that was his first time in a church. And that just kind of blew me away. So we gave him a little tour of the church and told him what it was all about. And he came back the next week, and I saw him. I said, "Hey, John, welcome back." And his mouth just hung open in awe. He's like, you remember my name? And that just, it still gives me chills, you know, and makes the hair stand up, because it's like something so simple as to remembering some people's names. It should be common, you know, and not an oddity for him or anybody out on the streets. And that gave me a real insight into wanting to tell stories. You know, I was sitting and listening to some of these people, and obviously, you know, we would share the gospel and things like that, but I got to know them on a more deeper level, a personal level. And I found out that's what a lot of the homeless people were missing, was that connection to other people. And so I had experienced the homelessness, and now I had gotten some context stories behind their situations. But if you go out and Google homeless, you'll see 1,000 photographers taking pictures of homeless people just out on the streets. And there's some beautiful pictures, but it's not anything new or special that would tell anybody anything differently. And then one day I was driving home from work, and I saw a sign for Family Promise. Their office is in West Bend, where I live. And I was like, I wonder what that is. You know, it sounds Family Promise. It sounds like they help people. So I Googled them and found out that they help homeless people get out of their situations, giving them in shelter, and then they help them on the road to recovery. And so I stopped in and I told them what I wanted to do. And I said, in exchange for introducing me to some people and me allowing me to take their portraits and getting their stories, I will give those portraits to you for your marketing and things like that. And it worked out really well for the first 5 years until COVID hit. But I had what I had been looking for. You know, I was taking portraits, and they just looked like ordinary people in the pictures. You would never know anything special about them. You know, it's like if I came in and I took your portrait, Andrew, and I put it on a wall in a gallery, and everybody would be, well, it's kind of nice, but what's the what's the deal? And now I can pair it with that story, and there's sort of not a shock value, but an eye-opening experience for people when they look at that picture, and it's just an ordinary person sitting there, sometimes in their living room, sometimes at work, sometimes just sitting at the dining room table or laying on a couch or something. An ordinary circumstance with an ordinary person, but an extraordinary story that's paired with it. And I've had people cry and hug me and say, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I've seen people just stand there and read those stories and look at those pictures over and over and over. And it's really a rewarding experience to see voices that are not heard being heard.
For me, it seemed like a very solemn experience. You know, not like going through an ordinary art gallery and, no, this is an interesting picture, interesting story. But everybody that was walking through there, you could tell was feeling the pain and the hurt and the frustration that these people have gone through. Because some of the stories are just, could happen to, well, most of the people that are homeless have stories that could happen to anybody,
right?
Any situation that
exactly
comes up. Yeah.
I've got one lady, she was shopping at Walmart, and she went to the restroom and she slipped on some water on the floor, hit her jaw on the sink, and obviously she broke her jaw, ended up in the hospital, and they wired it shut and they sent her home with some Oxycontin, and boom, she was addicted. Mm-hmm. She ended up actually robbing the pharmacy where she was getting her prescriptions filled. And finally, after the 5th time, she got arrested, unfortunately, in front of her kids. And she ended up doing 5 years in Tachita.
Yeah.
And it is. You know, you walk into a store and boom, 6 months later, you're an addict. And you're homeless. And
I
you're
was
in jail.
given some Oxycontin for some elbow surgery. And the doctor never once cautioned about addiction. Mm-hmm. He said, if you need more, just let me know. And after a couple pills, I realized I was physically getting, I could feel my body acting differently. And I was like, well, I got to stop this, because
it's not a good sign.
This is not a good sign. You know, let me go find some friends who have some pot or something like that, because of, you know, this pharmaceutical path is,
It's
so
scary.
scary,
Yeah.
and it leads to, once you're out on the street and you don't necessarily have that connection to the pharmacy, it leads to other things just to
Sure.
help you get by. But a lot of the stories also included domestic abuse and people who are homeless because they're running from their situation at home.
Right. Yeah, I would say about half of the people that I've talked to up until now, there's some sort of family trauma behind a lot of it. And that can lead to the addiction as an escape, or running away as an escape, or both. And of course, when you're homeless, sometimes you'll do anything to get your next fix. Because after the mental release, or whatever you want to call it, when you take drugs, it's like you're trying to escape. So after that wears off for a while, your body becomes addicted to the whatever it is you're taking. So now it's a mental and a physical addiction. So then you'll do anything to get what you need. And unfortunately, that can lead to prostitution and other bad things.
Yeah, and stories of kids on their own becoming homeless, and people trying to raise their families.
Yeah, I've got one lady. She was hanging at the Whitewater Arts Alliance, and her daughter has gone through some trauma herself and just graduated from high school, and the parents and her, the young lady, have given me permission to tell her story now. So I have mother and daughter that will soon be hanging in galleries and museums to spread the word. Unfortunate, but not surprising, but at the same time inspiring. That and you can see that it's sometimes generational, which in their circumstances was unfortunate. Just a series of unfortunate accidents.
Yeah. What's your experience when you first approach somebody to take their portrait, and then asking them, can I share your story with that? Because there's a level of, I assume, some shame in their situation.
There's a lot of anxiety that comes along with sharing stories sometimes, but most of the people I've met, they're kind of eager to share their stories. They want people to know. They want to have a voice. And they think, hopefully, that somebody might be impacted by this, and maybe find a way to get clean, or get off the booze, or get off the streets and seek some help. So most of them are doing it because they want to make a difference.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about the organization Family Promise that helps people get off the street. What do you think our society is lacking that we have? Let me back up here a second. Here in Whitewater, which is a small town in southern Wisconsin, I see homelessness, but not very much of it. It's like you see somebody passing through, or somebody saying, hey, I'm living behind Walmart and I just am new in town. But you go to other cities, especially on the West Coast, and you really see the impact on how many people in society are homeless. At least here in Whitewater, there's enough, I guess, organizations and groups
or is it just more hidden?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, people, how many people are living in this house? What are the ways to do it? So what is your experience on things that really help the biggest impact on people's lives?
One thing a young lady told me one time, she said that after her stint in prison, they just basically opened up the door and let her out. There was nowhere for her to go. No venue, no guidance on how to return to a normal life. Okay, in prison, she got clean, and she studied in, whatever she did for her recovery. But then when she got out, where do you go? She said that was the toughest part. You end up going back to the same situation that got you in there in the first place. So you either go back to your family, which sometimes is abusive, or you go back to your friends who are all addicts, And that's where the recidivism
Yeah, yeah,
rate is so high, is because they don't know where to go. And I think that should be part of our, well, what do they call the prisons? It's, it's to keep you away from society so you don't hurt anybody, but it's also to not re-educate. I can't think of the
rehabilitate. Yeah.
That should be part of the rehabilitation, is to, once you're out, where do you go? Some people go to halfway houses because that's part of their probation, but then, even there, it's not a real structured atmosphere or anything like that. There's no guidance. How do you get mental health? How do you get help? How do you get the medications that you may need? How do you get the doctor's appointments? How do you even apply for a job, or, that kind of thing? And I think that's the piece that's sort of missing as part of our rehabilitation, not just to remove them from society and provide them with access to a college education and things like that while they're incarcerated, but to come out and get them on a path towards normalization, if you will.
Right. So how do you do that?
Good. That's a question bigger than Marty.
Yeah.
I know the friend that told me this. She's been trying to start up a farm. So when people come out, she can be that venue where they can go and just find that peace of mind and that calmness, and harvest crops and plant crops, and just recover from, not just because incarceration has got to be traumatic in itself, and then come out and now you're all alone there. You're totally missing that structure. Okay. You're up at 6 a.m. and you do this and you do that and you go to the bathroom at 12, and this life is so regimented, and now all of a sudden there isn't anything. It got to make your mind whirl a little bit, I would think. I mean, I don't know. So
one of the people in one of your portraits talked about getting a speeding ticket, and she was fleeing her family in North Carolina and ended up in Wisconsin, but then realized she couldn't get her ticket switched back to a remote visit to go back to court. She had to actually be present, but she didn't have the money to go back. And so then she has a warrant for arrest there, along with other fines that keep adding up.
Right.
And so like our whole justice system,
I don't know about the whole justice system, but there are pieces that could be a little bit better, I guess. But, you're going across state lines, and not everybody's going to have a one size fits all, because that doesn't work either. Mm-hmm. You can make a federal law to make things right for everybody, but it's still not going to be right for everybody, because people in LA are different than people in DC, and who are different than Bangor, Maine, or Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or, Key West, Florida. Nothing's going to work for everybody.
Right. What I used to be a public defender, and
I saw that.
And every single client I had a mental illness that they're working with. And some individuals, or one individual, just had no way to keep a job. He just didn't have the ability to do that. And the court, there was some alimony payments he wasn't able to get. And the judge asked, like, what should I do here? It's like, well, my client can't keep a job. He just doesn't have the mental faculties to keep one this long before he dives back down into some deep space that impacts his boss and said, hey, we can't deal with you. Mm-hmm. But there's no programs. And I remember the judge telling me, it's like, I really wish we could require or make part of the sentence going out and getting this kind of help, but my hands are tied. It's either, I'm going to send you to jail and fine you, or you're innocent. You're either guilty or innocent, not you need help. And I think that's, I'm going to push back a little bit on the people different in different states needing different things. What did he mean by that? Like, how are people different in different states?
Well, you even said it yourself. In Whitewater, there's not so many homeless, but in the West Coast, there is. And that's because of the climate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've noticed it when we're in Honolulu. Homeless people are lined up, basically. You know, you go down Waikiki Beach and everybody's panhandling. You know, there's thousands of people who are homeless. Now there's a situation for you. That's different than Whitewater, isn't
Got
it?
it. Yeah. So you're talking like the situation that people are facing and the problems that the society is dealing with in different areas
Right.
have different things. Not that the
Yeah. So if the federal government said that, well, you need to spend so much money on homeless or mental health, and well, in Whitewater, you don't really need that. You know, maybe for some of the college kids, I don't know, but but you go out to Honolulu, yeah, there's a real situation, and even there, with one of the most liberal societies, there's people living in tents on beaches, just because it's cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I remember speaking to somebody up in Door County. The average median income at the time was like 35,000, but the average home price was about 750,000. What do you do? You know, is the government going to buy everybody a house? That's not sustainable either. You know, so I think that where those gaps are, that's where nonprofits and things like that have to come up, like Family Promise is a nonprofit.
Right.
And I know a friend of mine, he's in Theta Care in New London. It's a not-for-profit hospital. He's getting some of the best health care I've seen. You know, everybody's paid. You know, they're not all volunteers, but the company itself is not for profit. So they're not cutting corners. They're not charging $800 for a Band-Aid, you know,
Right.
you know, and that's what it should be to me. That's what our mental health care system, the whole gambit should be, a not-for-profit situation. And I think you would see a lot of this corporate greed disappear in the pharmaceutical industries and that kind of thing if it weren't for profit.
Yeah.
But it's big business, man.
One thing I was surprised to learn when I was in law school is that most hospitals are nonprofit, but yet they have, you know, their corporate execs making millions of dollars and these huge things. But the mission is maybe different than one that's geared at providing free services to homeless people. And because
if I remember right, in Wisconsin, I think that's a law. If you walk in without insurance, they have to take care of you at the hospital. I don't know about preventative medicine, but I know someone I used to work with, she didn't have the insurance. She was still on her probation period, and she had to take her kid to the emergency room instead of the walk-in clinic because they had to help her there.
right.
And that makes it hard on the rest of us.
But
if we have something, we can't go to the emergency room because it's clogged up with people who have headaches.
Right. They have to take you, but you still have that bill that's following you around until they decide to write you off.
Sometimes yes,
taxes.
sometimes no. I know. I don't know how to word this. I know that there are different prices for people with or without insurance, which I find kind of mind-numbing.
Right.
You know, they charge you more if you have insurance, but they charge you less if you don't. So if you don't have insurance and you walk into the hospital and they take care of you, your bill's going to be lower than if you did have insurance.
Right. When I was in Australia in college, you know, I went to the doctor a couple different times from different injuries I've had, and I was really surprised that it's all free to everybody.
A friend in Germany told me the same thing.
And then in India, I went to hospital, and I think I spent maybe $200 to get some stitches and some other things, where in the United States, that would be closer to $1,000 for the time I spent there at the hospital. And even the same insurance package that we have through our work, you can get in India for a tenth of the price. And the health facilities there are just as good for almost all the reasons you might want to go to a doctor. So I think, you know, health reasons can be another reason somebody becomes homeless because of bills that they have. There's so many things that everyday people are just one accident or one misfortune away from being on the street.
I had that. I went and saw my congressman, or I'm sorry, my representative in Congress. He had a town hall meeting, and I said pretty much the same exact situation. I said everybody's about one medical bill away from being bankrupt. What can we do about it? And his answer to me was, well, that's why I believe in competition. But it seems like the more the government gets involved and the more corporations get involved in the healthcare industry, the less competition there is. And the more they can get away with the quote unquote price gouging, if you will, the $800 for an aspirin or a Band-Aid. And that's, there's two sides of that coin. The more the government gets involved, I think the more expensive everything gets because there's more bureaucracy and there's more people who want a paycheck. So that's why I say get it into the hands of not-for-profits. That way you don't have the corporate greed involved. And at Theta Care, I don't know what the CEO makes. I have no clue, but I do know that my friend's getting some of the best health care.
Yeah. Talking to so many people and getting really personal, deep insights on how people's lives have changed. There's the descriptions of these events led to this event and this event led to this. What about something inside of them? Are you noticing changes that people recognize in themselves when they are getting the help?
Are they more self-aware, are you trying to say, as they recover?
Or just anything? Mentally, what does it feel like to finally get help or to, or when those situations hit, how does it impact how you see yourself? I mean, because obviously I'd wish to tell people, hey, look, let's work on some steps to get you through. But people can feel broken.
Sure.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to succeed on the road of recovery, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times to try your road to recovery. And let's face it, some people don't want to be on the road to recovery. I met one individual who liked being homeless, sleeping in a tent in the woods, and he was content with that. That's that, and I can't argue with him. If you're happy, that's fine. But some people that I've noticed have said that there's a lot less stress. I mean, when you are living on the streets, you're always in fear that the next person that walks by is going to beat the crap out of you or abuse you or take advantage of you. And if you're prostituting yourself to pay for your habit, same situation. You're in some dark corners that a lot of people don't look into, so some bad things can happen in those dark corners. And when they're out of that situation and they're on the road to recovery, those dark corners are gone and they're a little more relaxed. There still is apprehension because, am I going to fall back? Am I going to fail? Everybody's got that, the fear of failure. So is it different than what you or I would feel? I don't know. It's just the situations and the things they're are overcoming are a little different.
Right.
I had nerves coming to talk to you,
Yeah.
but I just sort of, this is going to be fun. I kept psyching myself into it, and this is going to be great. And I think that's a lot of what these people, they start getting that positive attitude back that I can do this. I can do this.
You said something that I hadn't ever thought about before. You talked about the fear of being on the street, the fear of getting beat up, the whatever. Something I haven't experienced.
I hope you never do.
Right. But I have had fear.
Mm-hmm. Everybody has.
And being able to understand what somebody's going through, not necessarily because you've been in that exact situation, but understanding the emotions that they're experiencing and saying, how does that fit when I've had similar thoughts? And it really makes you want to reach out and help them.
Yeah.
And find a way to stop that.
Well, let's face it, we're all afraid of people we don't know. And unfortunately, in American society, that's something that's taught from childhood on. Stranger danger.
Yeah.
Don't talk to strangers when you're a kid. And, for good reason. There are some bad people out there that would take advantage of innocence. And, but we carry that fear in our media, and that feeds into that fear. I mean, everything on the news is negative, because that's what grabs people's attention. I mean, our society is so divided because that's what people gravitate to, is that negative energy. But if we can ourselves overcome that fear of strangers, instead of, oh, there's some homeless guy, I'll go to the other side of the street so I can avoid him. Walk past him, look at him, say hello. Sometimes that's all it takes, and smile at him. I remember little side story. At our church, there was a woman who became I don't know if it was a deacon or an elder, but I think it was a deacon, because she was collecting the offering during the worship service on a Sunday morning. And we pass basically the hat. It's just a little basket that we passed around. People put their checks in, a dollar bill or whatever it is they can afford in the basket. And I was on the end of the pew, and I handed it back to her, and I just looked at her and I smiled. And she took it and she gave it to somebody else behind me. And later on, after the service was done, she goes, "Thank you." And I just sort of looked at her with a puzzled look, and I'm going, "Why? For what? What did I do?" And she says, "Your smile meant the world to me, because a lot of people have been on me because I'm a woman in a man's position." And I was like, "Really? Seriously? People are picking on you for serving in the church?" And all I did was smile at her, but it changed her day. And so when you walk past somebody who's homeless, you don't have to give them any money, but just smile at them.
Yeah. One of my early episodes with Reverend Clissa Martinelli, episode 3 or 4, I think, she said, just look at somebody and give them a smile, because it may be the only one they get that week.
Right.
And there's loneliness and separation when you're homeless. When people first reach out to try to help people some people are there and they've been there for a long time. They may just be resistant to help, and that's fine. That's their absolute right. But there's a lot of new people, especially young people, that are just out there. They haven't even established themselves in any way in society. They just somehow, at 17 or 18, they're out and they're lost. God, it makes me sad, because I have a son who's 22. I think I got that right. And 23.
Who's counting?
Right. And just knowing that at that age, everything is so new. There's so much bureaucracy in society, the way things work. And we're there still helping give advice on these steps. And there's so many young people out there who don't have that role model in their life. And being that role model might be the first step in how you just approach somebody to see, hey, can I help you? But you talked about this strangeness, like it almost takes a level of confidence in yourself as somebody that's going out to reach out, to move past this barrier of, oh, it's a person I don't know. I'm not going to just walk up on the street and talk to somebody I don't know. But somebody has to do that to initiate that. Where does that come
I'm not really,
from?
I still have that, and I'm not really doing that in my project. I don't walk up to somebody who's homeless at that point in time, because I'm telling the stories about recovery. So people are no longer on the streets. They were on the streets, so I'm not really doing that. So I really can't give any advice or anything like that on that sort of a situation. But, the people that I have met, I met a lady, she was in a park in Colorado. We were hiking at Fish Creek Falls in Colorado. And here's this woman, she's sitting on a stone wall that overlooks this gorgeous waterfall. And she's got a cigarette in one hand. She's got a beer bottle in the other one. She's got a baseball cap, and she's got all this stuff around her. And I was like, I looked at her and said, wow, you really know how to hike. I never thought about bringing beer along. And it started a whole conversation. And I ended up spending about 2 hours with her sister and her, and she's one of my recovering humans. She told me her whole life story. And then to finalize it, we emailed back and forth, but I took her picture right then and there at the waterfall. She signed a release form so that I could show it in my project. And sometimes it's just as simple as goofing around or saying something funny to somebody. And another weird story, not off subject a little bit, is my wife and I went to a restaurant, and we were standing there waiting for a table along with this other couple. And we just sort of chatted a little bit, and the hostess came up and said, your table is ready. And all four of us sort of went at the same time. And I was like, wow, I didn't know we were having dinner together. And he smiled and his wife smiled. And then we just sort of went our separate ways, and they sat and ate dinner, and we sat and ate our dinner. And we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And I'm like, can we get our check? We're all done eating. Where's our check? Oh, the other guy paid for it. And I was like, how bad has your day been that just a little bit of banter in a foyer of a restaurant made your day enough that you would buy me dinner? I didn't get to really thank him or anything like that. They left, and I was just dumbfounded, that somebody would just do that because of just a little goofing around. So sometimes it's just that simple, saying, hey, nice hat. See a Packer hat on somebody, for example. Oh, nice hat. You a Packer fan? Or, I've met hundreds and hundreds of people being in a motorcycle club, and it's that simple kind of bike you ride. You see a Harley logo on a shirt or a baseball cap or something like that. And it's that simple. It's just break the ice, and it'll get people to start opening up.
Yeah, you don't have to come in, I'm going to have this big conversation with this person. I'm going to get to know them. We're going to become vulnerable together. It's just, like you said, just a simple icebreaker.
Yeah.
And then fate will take it from there.
Yeah. I just sort of, I put it in God's hands, if you will.
Yeah.
Where it goes, it goes. Where it doesn't go, it doesn't go. And I've met people on other trips and stuff, and they're all gung-ho to be part of my project. And yeah, let's do this. And then, a couple of days later when I get home and I email them and I don't get any response, they change their minds. And I'm like, okay, this isn't for everybody.
Yeah. I really like when you said, I just put it in God's hands. Mm-hmm. And whatever religion you are, spirituality or not you have in life, people try to have a goal and objective of what they want, and helping people in homeless situations. Maybe I want to give all these people the means they need to live the life they want to live. But you can't get too attached to, like, I'm going to be the one that saves them and helps them, and we're going to change this.
I can't save anybody.
Right.
Only they can save themselves.
Right.
That's the first thing you got to remember.
But it's just recognizing humanity and having the courage to do just an icebreaker. Mm-hmm. And then just trusting that whatever is supposed to happen is going to come and push you and help and them, but not putting so much weight on, I'm going to do this today, or I'm going to become this person's friend. Some people you don't want to become friends with. You know?
Right, yeah.
We're not going to get along with regardless of your economic situation.
Right.
But just saying, hi, I like this. Talking to them just as just two humans on this planet together, and who knows where that can lead.
I've had fun conversations with people because you're walking in opposite directions towards each other, and you move to the right and they move to their left, and then you go the other way, and it's like finally you just look at each other, and I'll say something like, "Hey, you want to dance?" As long as we're at it, and that can just brightens somebody's day. You know, they smile and you smile, and you know, and that's all it takes sometimes. It's just smiling at each other, you know, instead of, you know, are they Republican or are they Democrat? Are they rich or are they poor? Are they a CEO or, you know, you stop trying to categorize people.
Yeah. And for me, this is not a common practice for me, but something I strive for, is whenever I see somebody, just try to recognize the same divine energy and spark and life force and creation in them that's in me, and put aside other types of differences.
Oh, you're a lot deeper than I am. I think that's a great philosophy, and I'm not knocking it. It's just that's a lot deeper than how I start out. You know, it sounds like you've already dug the well before you've started shoveling. You know what I mean?
No.
Well, you're already at this deep philosophical universe is connected kind of thing, and I'm just like, nice hat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking it.
Whatever it is,
that's you.
I've come across people where our eyes catch, and you can tell it's like,
Sometimes, yeah.
yeah, okay,
I get you.
There's something there, and even if I don't see that, I'm going to try to give the person at least the benefit of the doubt, and just saying, "Hey, nice hat." They may say, "Yeah, whatever," you know.
Yeah.
But not taking that personally, because that's the role that they're in right there at that place in their life.
Right.
And maybe they get 100 people throughout their life that come by and say hi, and then that's what helps.
We were driving down the road the other day, excuse me, and there was this guy weaving in and out of traffic going like 85 miles an hour. And in the old days, as it were, I would get kind of ticked off. It's like, oh, he's cutting everybody off. He's going to cause an accident. But I'm getting the philosophy now where maybe he just found out his kid's in the hospital and he's going to the hospital. You know, I'd be going 80 miles an hour too. So you just have to change your perspective a little bit. That's all it is. And as a photographer, that's one of the things I'm really all about. It's like perspective, you know. If you take a picture of somebody looking down at them, that makes them diminutive and subordinate. If you take a picture upwards angle, that gives them a sense of power and authority. So it all depends on, it's the same person. It's the same camera, the same lighting's all the same, but the perspective is different. So sometimes that's all you have to do is just change your perspective.
Yeah, and getting pissed off at drivers that cut you off, I'd do it. I cock my horn, you know. But that helps you to stay more centered and calm in your life. And then so when you get out of your car, you're just in a little bit better mood than if you had been spending your drive angry at somebody.
Oh, I still get angry sometimes.
But the more we can catch ourselves and kind of develop that sense of perspective, it just helps us connect with more people that you never know.
And be a little calmer and less stressed.
Yeah, and I think that's contagious.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Then I must have infected a lot of people lately.
Your art is so inspirational. Is there a place where people can go to see it online?
You can. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I do post stuff every once in a while about this Recovering Humans project. Right now, the show at Whitewater Arts Alliance is over with. That ended on Saturday. And I still have 14 stories and portraits up at the library in West Bend, Wisconsin. And come fall, I will have the whole family. That's what I call them. They're my recovering human family. The whole family's going to be up at Lakeland University in Plymouth, Wisconsin. So it'll be the first time the whole family's together ever.
Wow.
Yeah. I try to show here and there in art competitions, things like that, but that's like one or two here and there, and that's a real iffy kind of thing. I don't have a website. Just use social media right now. And a friend of mine is pushing for me to do a book. I'm like, I don't know. I did one on Shutterfly, and it came out really kind of cool. But it was $80 a crack, and nobody's going to spend $80 for 20 pages. That's a lot of money. But I know Amazon has some sort of publishing service where they charge per printing or something like that. And I've been meaning to look into that, but I've been in too many shows doing too many things.
Well, you're making a difference in the world with your art, and it inspired me to ask you to come on the show, and more people will watch this and they'll have a new perspective on a lot of the social situations happening here in the United States and around the world. And so thanks so much for that.
Just one last quick story. When I was going to take all the pictures down on Saturday, there was a young lady, maybe 10 years old, something like that, 12 years old. And she's standing there and she's looking at one of the pictures on the wall, and then she's reading the story, and then she looks at the picture, and then she reads the story a little bit more, and she's going back and forth. And she spent quite a bit of time standing there doing that. And it wasn't with just the one, but it was with a lot of them. But I grabbed a picture of her standing there looking at the piece. And I didn't have her face. It's just from the back of her head or anything like that. Just like that. And I took that picture and I sent it to the person whose portrait she was looking at. And my friend goes, wow, thank you so much for sharing that with me. You know, and all I said was, oh, you made an impact on somebody today. And she said that picture of that girl looking at her portrait made an impact on her. And that's that reciprocal relationship that I'm striving for, is that these people are trying to help the people in the galleries and museums that are looking at this, and the people looking at in the galleries and museums are helping them.
Yeah, there's such a connection between everything on this planet, whether it's nature and people.
It's symbiotic.
Nothing does not have an impact on something else. And so we get to choose what kind of impact we have and how we want to go through our days.
Well, what's one of the laws of physics? Everything has an equal and opposite reaction. There you go. And we're all energy, right?
We're all energy. Yeah. I'll just leave it at that. That's a whole nother rabbit hole of science and physics that I love.
Okay. Maybe interview part 2.
Maybe another episode. But thank you for being here.
It was my honor.
So much. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and you know somebody that might be inspired by it, share it with them. To learn more about the show, go to chasingthetimeless.com.